Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the all-new version of Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator version 5. My name is Melissa Palmer. I'm a senior technologist with the Office of the CTO here at Veeam, and I'm also the product marketing manager for Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator. And today I'm joined by Kirsten Stoner. Kirsten, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Welcome everybody to our webinar. Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator is a really cool tool that you can use in your data center for disaster recovery. So I'm happy to be able to be here today and talk to you guys about it.
So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the current climate of disaster recovery. We'll take a look at the core features of Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator. We'll take a closer look at the V5 features, and then we'll go into a demo of version 5 and we'll take it from there. So if anybody has any questions at any time, please drop them in the chat and we'll be happy to address them. So what are the challenges that we were facing in 2021 and now in 2022, of course? Zero tolerance for downtime and data loss. We need our data available as often as possible. If something happens in our environment, we need to get it back up and running very fast. We have to keep our backup data safe from ransomware. That has been a hot topic for well more than the past year. We also need to meet those compliance and retention goals. If we're audited and can't prove that we are in compliance, that could be detrimental to our business. And then at the end of the day, if a disaster does strike, we need to be able to recover despite storage and staff constraints. And of course, we have to do all of these things while keeping costs in check. One thing I just want to come out and say is that ransomware is a disaster. If you're struck by ransomware, one of the best tools you can have in your arsenal is a thoroughly documented and tested and up-to-date disaster recovery plan. That's your point for restoring those systems and comes into play. We've also done a huge independent research survey, and that data is going to be coming out, I believe, February 22nd. And we asked organizations how related were their disaster recovery plans with their information security teams. And the resounding response was that information security is very, very concerned with disaster recovery because of the ransomware phenomena, right? And the good news is a lot of times that our information security teams might have budget that we might not have as the virtualization team or the backup team or the infrastructure team. So when we think of ransomware in the context of disaster recovery, it suddenly becomes much more real just because the probability of a ransomware attack is so much higher than that of a traditional disaster. So why does everybody struggle with disaster recovery so much? Now, I've been doing disaster recovery my whole career. It started when I was an intern on Wall Street many years ago. And it's something that's kind of been carried out throughout my time in the industry. And it really boils down to a couple things. Beyond what's on this slide, a lot of people see disaster recovery as, well, kind of depressing and kind of boring, right? So bad things are going to happen. We have to be ready. No one really wants to deal with that all the time. And, it's not the most exciting topic unless you're going to use that disaster recovery plan, of course. But at the end of the day, our IT environments are gigantic at this point, thanks to VMware and the virtualization sprawl. And they're always changing, right? There's always new VMs being deployed and new applications coming online. And recovery can be really complicated if we're talking about a large amount of systems or applications. And quite frankly, it often fails. I've been parts of disaster recovery tests where we lock ourselves in the data center for an afternoon, a weekend. We start trying to recover things and we find that things are not working as expected, but maybe they work enough for us to say we passed our test. Hey, we got some of the application online. That's good enough. Let's put our green check marks in the boxes and carry on. But we wouldn't actually be able to successfully execute that plan in the event of a real disaster. And then finally, disaster recovery planning takes time and resources, right? We have to document our systems or dependencies, what VMs are a part of these systems. And then we need resources, not only from a recovery perspective, but from a human perspective, right? People need to do these things. And that's these are just some of the reasons why, historically speaking, disaster recovery planning has been so difficult. Now, what is the solution? If we talk to any of the big analyst firms, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, pick your favorite, there's been many discussions on disaster recovery orchestration in the last several years. One of the reasons, of course, this has picked up is due to ransomware, right? We're seeing a lot more customers have to recover their environments at scale. And let's face it, I know I don't want to be the person sitting in front of the backup and replication console or in charge of the infrastructure when the CEO is standing next to you and yelling at you why you're not recovering fast enough, right? For a human to manually start and going and recovering hundreds and thousands of systems, that's not just scalable, and that's quite frankly going to be error prone. So what we really need to do is have these disaster recovery solutions automated and orchestrated. So now let's talk a little bit more of some of the key capabilities of Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator version 5, as well as what's new in this release. Kirsten, can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So first off, if you're not familiar with Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator already, like Melissa mentioned, Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator is going to help you, plan for a disaster. It's going to leverage your backups, your replicas, your CDP replicas, perform failover and restores to build a disaster recovery workflow and to automate those recovery processes when your production site goes down. It also helps eliminate any type of manual steps. So any type of manual step that can be prone to human error is eliminated through orchestrating your disaster recovery plan. And with Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, there are some core capabilities that it can provide. So you have that automated risk reduction. So by automating your DR plans, you are removing the risks associated with manual processes. You can save valuable time because you're establishing your recovery workflow prior to the disaster. So, you don't have to go in, like something happens, you don't have to go into the tool and say, okay, now we have to recover this, this, and this. You've already, established what needs to be recovered first and set up that workflow. You can also generate documentation through the different templates that Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator contains. And this can then be shared with key stakeholders and updated when needed. So everybody in the organization, when a disaster does occur, everyone in the organization knows what to expect because they've seen the documentation and they have looked through it already. So they know exactly what steps are needed and they can refer back to it as well. And then it restores confidence. With the ability to, test your DR plans, you can establish realistic recovery time and recovery point objectives for your disaster recovery plan. This is going to allow you to try out your plan, test it, and make sure that you are meeting the goals of the business. So to add to these core capabilities, there's some new functionality that version 5 introduced. So we have enhanced our storage integrations. So we've added the support for HPE storage, allowing you to utilize storage snapshots in your recovery plans. You can streamline operations through dashboards that provide quick views into how your recovery plans have tested, if there's any failures, warnings, successes, so you can fix them before any type of recovery impact occurs. And then you get a simplified plan workflow by providing visibility into your entire infrastructure, into your virtual infrastructure. You can, see what's being protected by your plans and see what's not being protected, and then create plans as well through, these new views and workflows. So when we want to talk a little bit more about automated risk reduction, so by orchestrating your mission critical applications, you're going to be able to utilize, continuous data protection replicas, regular replicas, backups, and storage snapshots to create your disaster recovery plan and make sure that you are able to restore from um, these data protection operations, whichever one that you would choose in case of a disaster. You can automatically check your DR plans through testing. That's going to let you know if you're meeting your RPO and RTO targets. And then with this ability to, spin up this data lab, you get that test environment that's going to be isolated from your production environment. So you can do things like test your DR plans, patch testing, testing upgrades, or even training activities without any operational impact on your environment. So giving you a little bit more automated processes to reduce any type of risks when it comes to disaster recovery. You're going to be able to save valuable time. One of the cool things that Melissa's going to show you a little bit later is just the different documentation templates that are available within Disaster Recovery Orchestrator. This template is going to be updated to how your disaster recovery plan is performing. If your virtual machines are meeting those recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives, if there is any violations, and then you can also customize this documentation. So really removing all that time that used to be spent on documenting, creating your Excel, creating your PDF document is going to be taken care of for you by utilizing those built-in documentation templates that Veeam Orchestrator provides. You're also going to be able to, use that data lab to schedule your disaster recovery plan to run and get, documentations based on those test results. So you're going to be able to test your plan, see what's going well, what's going wrong, and then, fix the plan to support your business. You're also going to be able to utilize out-of-the-box steps that need to be taken when you need to recover critical applications. So applications around SQL Server, Exchange, SharePoint, Active Directory, and web servers. There's out-of-the-box steps that need to be performed on those special applications um, when you are recovering them. And if one of these out-of-the-box steps isn't what you need, you have the option to run a custom script that you can personalize to make sure that you are recovering your applications properly. You're going to get restored confidence because you're going to make sure that you're meeting your RPOs and RTO requirements. With one-click failover, failback, and restores, you're going to be able to recover single applications to entire sites. You have proven that you've proven and tested your DR plan. You've made sure that it's meeting compliance through verifying backups, replicas, storage snapshots in an isolated network. You've tested your plan. You know if you're going to meet your RPOs or RTOs. You're not violating, what is required of your business. You're fixing that before you even need to, perform a disaster recovery plan in a production environment. And then you also, remain secure with that role-based access control. So after you've set up your plan and your workflow, you've tested it, you're feeling confident that, if a ransomware attack were to occur, or maybe a natural disaster, you know that your DR plan is ready to tackle that disaster and overcome it and get up and back and running. So now that we've discussed these three core capabilities, let's talk about some of the key enhancements that have been introduced with version 5. So we have that HPE storage integration. So this is going to allow you to orchestrate failover from HPE storage systems, leveraging that HPE native snapshot replication. It's going to help reduce any type of complexity when it comes to the recovery process. You're going to be able to streamline operations through at-a-glance views of your environment. So you're going to be able to see what is wrong, where there might be a warning, what is finishing successfully. You can gather all this information on the errors that are happening and then make sure that you fix them before any impact on that recovery process happens. You get a simplified plan workflow. So with the inventory view, you'll be able to see into your environment, see what's protected and what's not, and then also be able to launch the plan creation wizard through that view. So one of the big things is really that HPE storage integration. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator version 5 is going to support HPE Primera 3PAR and Electron 9000 storage systems. So this is really going to allow you to utilize that already smart snapshot technology within these HPE storage systems, making sure you're meeting those RPO and RTO requirements. This is going to help you leverage the documentation as well as data lab testings for those HPE storage systems as well. So creating a plan and having that documentation available to you, having that data lab available to you, utilizing those HPE storage systems is really going to help simplify recovery, simplify flexibility, and make sure you're really getting the most out of your storage investments that you've already, invested in.
All right. Thank you, Kirsten. So I want to talk a little bit more about disaster recovery testing before we go to the demo because it's just so important, right? One of the things that we know when we're looking at a situation like ransomware recovery is that we need to be able to really know that we're going to meet our RTOs, right? So Orchestrator is a wonderful way to do this. And I'm going to show you during the demo a couple of features that make it really easy to do. But beyond disaster recovery testing, as Kirsten mentioned, there's a lot more that you can do with your testing environment. So when we run a disaster recovery test, which I will for you in a few moments, you have the ability to leave that lab environment running for an extended period of time so you can do other things. One of the big things that come to mind and that I have a lot of customers leveraging is these testing environments for patch testing, right? There's always nasty vulnerabilities out there. We always have our Windows patches to deal with, and this is a really quick and easy way to spin up an environment, test our patches, and throw it away when we're done. Compliance and analytics, if we want to run kind of any analytics test, we can spin up an environment. If we need to do some kind of compliance verification, that's a great option too. And then of course, DevOps, IT services, and operations. There's this interface that I'm going to show you soon is really easy to use to the point where you can empower the application teams to go in there and be able to start their own copies of their environment for their testing. And of course, this all leads to increased innovation. What it also helps with is being ready for a disaster recovery execution, right? By doing this testing, we'll be able to figure out, can our environment handle our production workloads? Can our recovery environment actually recover everything? We can do full scale DR tests, test everything, and stress test our environment so we know where things break so we can fix them ahead of time. And then when we have to go and say, okay, well, we don't have enough infrastructure to recover everything or to recover tier 1 and tier 2 data, we need more infrastructure, we need to work on this. We also can use this as a business justification of, hey, don't worry, these DR resources are not going to sit idle. We're going to use it for more than just disaster recovery. Now, I have a couple of questions I want to just talk through real quick on this slide because I've been getting a couple. So Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator is to recover all of your different workloads from the most mission critical workloads protected by Veeam CDP to your regular replicas, to your backups, to your storage snapshots. And beyond the HPE enterprise storage arrays that we've introduced in this release, we also support NetApp ONTAP systems and Lenovo ThinkSystem DM. Now, you're going to be able to leverage your existing backup and replication jobs and your existing storage replication jobs in your environment. That all still gets used, right? If you already have CDP set up, backup set up, replica set up, we're just going to orchestrate the recovery. And you do need to go through a quick wizard to build a disaster recovery plan so we can generate all of that documentation for you. And what I'm going to show you is how to actually go through that wizard, build that plan. I'll show you some samples of the documentation, and then we'll run a disaster recovery test as well. So Kirsten, I think it's time to switch to demo. If you can make me the presenter, please.
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. Okay.
No
I
problem.
was on mute again. Okay,
It happens.
you should have it now.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is share my screen right here. And Kirsten, let me know when you can see the Orchestrator UI, please.
I can see it.
All right, so this is Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator. It's an HTML5 based interface, means you can get it anywhere, any device. And I want to point out some of the new version 5 features as we walk through this demo. So first and foremost, we talked about the new expanded dashboard. I have a great dashboard here that gives me an at-a-glance view of my environment. If I have plans running, if my readiness checks are running, how many plans I've tested. And when I have an issue in the environment, I can see it right here in this current issues pane. And what's more is I can actually figure out what my issue is. So let's go ahead and click on this warning real quick, process replica VM. Restore point doesn't meet RPO. That's pretty crystal clear. That means I need to go back to backup and replication and make sure that I have my job set up right. Likewise, we're going to see the same thing here. I have a CDP policy set for a 1-minute RPO, but I have a target RPO and Orchestrator set up to 5 seconds. And of course, those two values don't match, so I'm going to have issues. Whenever I have an issue in a check or with an execution or with a test, it'll show up on this dashboard. And it's really easy to go in there, figure out the errors and fix them. Let's head on over to our brand new inventory view. Now this is something new in version 5, and we have several different ways that we can categorize our virtual machines for Orchestrator. We can see I have some data stores here, and I have a NetApp data store here, which I could create a plan off of. I have backup and replication jobs, so I can just basically orchestrate the recovery of my existing backup and replication jobs. I have vSphere tags here, and then I have some custom Veeam business groups here as well. So whatever works best for you, feel free to leverage. I really like vSphere tags for just about everything for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I like to power my backup and replication jobs by vSphere tags so that when a new server comes online, a new virtual machine, it gets tagged with whatever application it is. And once BNR sees that a new server has been tagged, it's automatically going to start backing that server up, right? Likewise with Orchestrator, if I'm using a vSphere tag to build my orchestration plan, or my backup and replication job is based on vSphere tags, right? I'm going to be able to capture that new VM and immediately make sure it's protected. And one thing that Orchestrator does do, and will tell you what is protected and what's unprotected. So I see I have a couple of VMs here that are tagged and they're protected by Orchestrator, but I have a VM here that is not protected by Orchestrator. Another great thing we can do is actually launch our plan creation wizard right here. So let's go create a new disaster recovery plan. I'm going to select a BNR job. I'm going to click create. Let's call this demo today. Put in a lot of information if I wanted here, contact name, email, telephone number, all makes sense. And then I have to pick my scope. Now I'm logged in as an administrator, as you can see. Under my name right here, it says administrator, which means I can see everything. But site scopes are Orchestrator's method of role-based access. So I have the ability to come in here and scope out an application. I can pick the VM groups. I can pick the plan steps. I can pick the recovery resources that go with that application, map them all together. And if I log in with that site scope, I will only see those elements that I have permission for, which, like I said, is great to turn over to application owners. One, because they know their application's the best, of course. And two, then they're actually able to come in here, create their own DR plans and test their own DR plans and make use of that testing environment for things like patch testing, training, what have you. Select a plan type. We're going to go with a restore plan today, which is a restore from backup. And when I click restore plan, you'll see a couple of different things go into play. These options will change very, very slightly based on what plan type I have, but it's the same general workflow. So let's select a restore plan and click next. And we have a recovery location. So a recovery location is just a grouping of resources, right? It's a logical grouping of our resources that we have vSphere tags applied to our vSpheres hosts, our clusters, our data stores to group those applications together. We can have as many recovery locations as we'd like if we want to test different scenarios. And we can also decide, do we want Veeam's instant VM recovery location to be, instant VM recovery technology to be leveraged as part of that as well. Instant VM recovery is simply starting that up from the backup repository to get the lowest RTO from possible from backups. And we're going to go with this recovery location right here, but this original VM location is always there out of the box. So out of the box, you can recover VMs to their original location, no problem. VM groups, I based this plan based on this backup and replication job here. I can click view VM, see what's on in that job, and I could add additional groups if I would like to here. Couple of different recovery options. So if something happens in my environment for any reason, if a step fails, do I want to halt the plan, manually intervene somehow, and then continue the plan or retry that failed step? Or do I just want Orchestrator to keep on going through that whole plan? Can we recover the VMs simultaneous or in sequence? Up to us, but we can do it in parallel or in a specific startup order, which really simple to set. And then we have VM steps. I'm going to add this right here. This is a custom step that I've created and added. And then that's just a PowerShell script. So we have the ability to put any script we would like into Orchestrator, but we have a number of out-of-the-box verification steps right here. So we've got like an Exchange, we've got our SQL, we've got our IIS, we have all those key critical enterprise apps. I'm not going to add any of them right here because when you add something in this wizard at the VM step level, it applies to every VM in the plan. So I don't want to necessarily be running a SQL check against something that's not a SQL database. But these plans are super simple to edit later. Protect VM groups. I actually don't have this set up right now, but I should, because what you can do with this is have a backup and replication job configured that starts protecting those assets after recovery. So I've restored everything from backup. Those VMs that are restored are now our production. So Orchestrator will automatically protect those for us. Very important. And then, of course, we have our RPOs and RTOs, and we're going to measure this several different ways. We're going to measure that RTO with the data lab test, which I'll show you in a moment. And that RPO will be measured as part of the data lab test, but also as part of that readiness check, which is run daily or it can be run on demand. And that readiness check is going to take a look at your recovery locations, make sure everything's good to go. Couple of examples I've seen where things were not so good. You saw some examples in the dashboard where we weren't meeting our RPO. Orchestrator will absolutely flag that. And it will look for issues like if you're using NFS-based storage and you haven't set up the export policy for your recovery hosts, Orchestrator will let you know that the hosts are unable to see that storage. And it will also let you know things like, oh, you have a host in maintenance mode. You should really take a look at that so you can make sure you have enough capacity to recover. Very useful. We have report templates. These templates are customizable. I've customized this one, so we'll see in a couple moments. We're going to schedule a plan definition report. Now, that is your disaster recovery plan, which I will show you in a little bit, and that readiness check to run automatically. We'll run a readiness check as part of plan creation. We'll click next. We'll click finish. And let's head over to orchestration plans where we actually have this plan being created right here. It takes just a couple seconds. As you can see, we've passed our readiness check. Now, there's a couple of ways to consume basically any information from Orchestrator. One is you can just click right on the plan name and Orchestrator will show you the current status. So whether a plan is running, testing, or we run a readiness check, we can see everything in our environment and we have lots of green check marks. Everything is good to go. Or we can also come over to reports right here and say, I want to see the reports for this plan. I want to see the readiness check report for this right here. And the great part is these reports can also be automatically emailed to key stakeholders when they run. So you can get your readiness check daily, you can get your plan definition report daily. When a test runs, you can have the results right to your inbox. They're very handy. And as you can see, I've customized a logo right here. And I'm going to scroll through it. And this whole table of contents is hyperlinked. It's super simple to use. I've made a couple customizations to this template. I added an application diagram, some recovery team information, some other helpful information. And I can just keep going through this plan. And like I said, everything is hyperlinked. We can see right here in this readiness check that I have met my RPO. We're good to go. Our recovery location looks good. Again, hyperlinked. So if I click in, it shows me what it looked like in what it looked at my recovery location. We have all those beautiful green check marks. And then the same thing, we can go look at our VMs. They'll be hyperlinked right here. And we can see all the steps that will be taken. Again, we can see our RPOs. And this plan looks really, really good. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to come in here And we're going to run a really quick disaster recovery test. So we're going to select our demo plan. I'm going to say manage, and I'm going to say verify, and I'm going to say run data lab test. Couple different things when it comes specifically to restoring from backup. We can do a quick test where we just run off of instant VM recovery really fast, or we can do a full test if we want to do a full simulation where we actually go and do the full restore to the VMs. Let's do a quick test. We pick our data lab here. We pick our recovery location we want to test against here. Power options, again, do I want to test and power it off, or do I want to let it run for any amount of time afterwards? We click summary, we click finish. And this plan is going to start, but I just want to hit a couple of questions in here real quick. Oh, Kirsten, thank you. You were in there answering some questions. Recovery locations working with EC2 or Azure. Tim, I'm going to say stay tuned for more information on that, especially around the Veeam on time frame. Any integrations for pure storage devices? At this time, we're just supporting the storage arrays that I mentioned, the HPE, the NetApp Lenovo, but thank you for that feedback. I will make sure that gets back to our teams at Veeam. And what else? We're looking pretty good. All right, so let's go take a look at some of this stuff going on. So we can see that we've actually started our data lab right here. That's that proxy appliance that is going to kind of create our isolated bubble for our VMs. And if I come back to Orchestrator, again, I click into the plan to see what's going on. I can see that my proxy appliance has started, it's running, and everything is looking pretty good. So let's go see what else we have here. So let's another vote for pure storage support. Thank you for the feedback. So let's come on over to I want to look at this CDP replica plan here. We're going to run a brand new fresh definition report, and we're going to come in here and look at a disaster recovery plan. A great question here. Will this use the Sure backup appliance if we have one? So yeah, so if you already have, yeah, so this looks like Sure backup with actual real world capabilities. Yeah, so the data lab that we're talking about right here is the virtual lab from backup and replication. You would configure it once in backup and replication. And let me just pop over to data labs here. You would see ones that weren't yet mapped into Orchestrator. Orchestrator would see them. You map into Orchestrator and say, okay, I want to be able to use that data lab. And then when you saw me go run that disaster recovery test, you saw me pick the virtual lab or data lab I wanted to use. So absolutely, yeah, this is basically based on the Sure backup technology. So, and you can use your existing Sure backup appliances if you would like to. All right, so we were going to take a look at that plan definition report on this Majestic CDP replica plans. Go to reports. Oh, we got a nice fresh plan definition. So this is a disaster recovery plan, updated daily, of course. Again, you can see that I've customized this template a little bit. Go back up, you can see my pretty logo here. And if we keep scrolling through, you're going to see the same information that I had in the other document, right? Because this is all the same template. All the documentation has the same look and feel. And if we keep scrolling down, we can see that we have some VMs in here. And here's where things get really interesting. When I click on the VM name, I can see that here are the VMs, here are all the parameters, here are all the steps. But when I scroll down, another great thing this does is it actually gives us the information about what happens during each and every step, right? So that's really important from an auditing perspective. And if I come down to the bottom here, we can see the plan change log, right? So there were some changes made over time. Again, automatically sent to your inbox on a daily basis. And we can see testing is complete. If I come over to vCenter, I see my data lab. And everything is looking good. We're going to let that run. And did I run a lab test on anything else? I did. So I ran a different restore test. Actually, let's go look at a storage failover document real quick. So this was a NetApp data store, and you can see I ran a data lab test. Let's go look at that data lab test report real quick. And again, it's going to look really similar to all the other documentation you've seen today. I did not customize this template, so I think this is the out-of-the-box template, right? So there's no logo, there's not some custom stuff, but we still get the gist of it, right? And the really important thing when it comes to a data lab test is, well, there's two important things, right? Here are our recovery objectives, very clearly stated. And if I scroll down, I can see that RPO and RTO, were they met? No. So I met my RPO, but I didn't meet my RTO, which is really interesting, right? So at this point, we know we got the email that we didn't meet our RTO. We need to go in and fix something, right? So it's really important that we have these things ahead of time so we can go in and make changes and be able to meet those RTOs at any time. Does this have an issue with VMware vCloud VMs? I don't know exactly what you mean by VMware vCloud, but if you're talking about VMware Cloud on AWS, Azure, GCP, anything, any cloud running VMware, yes, this works. The level of integration and how much works matters on what cloud you're using. So for example, on VMware Cloud with AWS, some of the data lab testing doesn't work because they don't expose the network to you to make changes. But if you were looking at one of the VMware Cloud on IBM or Oracle solutions, it does work. And we actually have a KB that has all of that listed out when we talk about the different ones. ESXi server. Oh, this is my favorite question. Okay, so this works about VMware VMs. What about ESXi server recovery? So I'm also a VMware certified design expert. I have done a lot of different things with VMware for a very long time. And I don't think that it should be about recovering your hosts. I think you're better off if you can rapidly rebuild them, right? So I can come in and I can rebuild my ESXi host really fast. And if you are using host profiles, yeah, you need to back up that host profile. But you might also want to take a look at tools like Ansible or even look at Power CLI, right, to be able to rapidly reconfigure those hosts in a uniform method. So there's lots of different ways to, I like to say, rebuild your ESXi environment, right? We see lots of VMware ransomware these days. I say rebuild it because it's toast. Don't necessarily don't worry about recovering as much. It's more of a rebuild to me. If you have multiple sites, where do you install Orchestrator? That's not something I can really answer right now. Generally speaking, you want to put it in the DR site or that makes the most sense. But if you're recovering to multiple sites, it doesn't really matter as long as there's network connectivity. And Orchestrator will automatically use the copy of your data closest to the recovery location. So if you're using like backup copy jobs or something like that, there's a checkbox in a recovery location to say prefer backup copy job, and Orchestrator will just use that backup copy job at that site. That's a discussion you might want to have with your Veeam SE or SA because there's lots of different ways to architect that. And let's see, I think, what if you need to change virtual machine IP address for the DR location? So in the recovery locations, let me just look at a recovery location real quick and show everybody. We have a lot of different options. So if I come here, I have network mapping rules. So I can map networks, and then I can also put in re-IPing rules, right? So I can do wildcard method. So if I'm going from 10.20.30.x to 10.20.50.x, right? I can do that as a wildcard, or I can put in my specific remappings here. So yeah, Orchestrator will handle some of that remapping for you and all of that good stuff. So let's go back to our dashboard. And okay, so our disaster recovery test did its thing. It looks like it was probably successful. We're powering off our data lab now. So if I came in here, you're seeing everything starting to shut down. And we'll just click into this and we can probably see that everything has been verified and works really well here. So I think, Kirsten, let's go back to the slides. So I know I had a lot of, I'm going to make you the presenter again. I had a lot of licensing questions in the chat that I haven't answered yet, but I think I told a few of you that we do have a slide on that later on. So let's head back to our slides. All right. All right, so packaging and licensing, couple of things. There are two big ways to consume Orchestrator, and Orchestrator is consumed at the VM level, right? It is not a part of Veeam Availability Suite or Veeam Backup and Replication. It is a separate license. But with the DR pack, we have the ability to protect all of the VMs of your environment at a significant discount. So the DR pack is 80% off of list price. Please reach out to your Veeam sales rep for more details on how that pricing works for you. But that's a significant discount when you protect all the VMs in your environment and standalone, right? So that is like, okay, I only want to use my first 100 most critical VMs, that kind of thing. So there's a couple of ways to consume it. It's in packs, it's per pack of 10 of VM licenses. So you're ordering them in multiples of 10. And it is an add-on to Veeam Backup and Replication or Veeam Availability Suite. So Veeam has been really hard at work. In the last couple months of 2021 alone, we had Veeam Availability Suite and VBR version 11a come out. We had releases of all of the cloud native products. And then we also had releases of both Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator version 5 and Kasten 4.5. Now, here's the really interesting thing. We actually had 2 releases of Orchestrator in 2021. We had a version 4 that came out in March, and we had version 5 that came out in November. So Veeam has been very hard at work. I see a couple of few more questions. We just have a few minutes left that I want to address. Protected VMs. Is it a Veeam term? Does this mean anything, right? So yeah, so in Veeam, we have this notion of protected and unprotected VMs. That kind of comes from our friends at Veeam One, and we've added that into Orchestrator. Veeam One can take a look at your environment and give you a report on all the VMs that are protected by Veeam. But what that will show you is something that is way, way more important. It's also going to show you the VMs that are not protected by Veeam, right? So if you have gaps in your data protection, whether it be an orchestrator for your orchestration plans or the public cloud products that you see here or agents or any of that, it will find what is not being protected by Veeam so you can identify those availability gaps before they happen. So I think I've answered most of the questions. I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us today. And this concludes today's webinar.
Yep. Thank you, guys.